Coming up on show 920, the Rivian R1T gets its first big review, and what did they think about it? Stick around, I'll tell you more. Plus on the podcast today, EVs overtake diesel in Europe, a new all-electric Ford Transit, and why Tesla supercharging could become cheaper if you don't mind doing it in unsociable hours. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whether you're listening around the world. Welcome to EV News Daily. My name is Martin Lee, and I go through all of the EV news to save you time so you don't have to. And welcome to a new producer, executive producer on Patreon. That'll be you, Christopher Barth. Thank you very much, sir. Signing up at $10 a month to support this show to make it happen. And I'll give you all on Patreon a mention at the end of the show, as I'd like to do on a Friday. Well, longtime partner of Tesla, Panasonic, kick us off on the news today. Panasonic will be working on a battery pack made from Tesla's new 4680 form factor cells. These are the new bigger ones, the new cells, which will be made initially by Tesla on their pilot line in California, but the first operational volume line will be, at least in one of their own factories, that'll be the Berlin Gigafactory where they're made for the first time. Well, Panasonic's had a long relationship with Tesla, co-building the Nevada Gigafactory, and around a year or so ago, maybe more, it looked like the relationship perhaps was cooling a little bit, with statements made from senior management on both sides. Elon Musk was talking about how Panasonic haven't used the full potential and delivered the full potential of how big the Gigafactory could be. Panasonic, on the other hand, said how they were excited to work with new partners. Now it seems the love fest is back on. Tesla and Panasonic sitting in a tree, etc. Because Panasonic just announced they will be investing in a new battery production line to make the battery packs based on Tesla's own 4680 cells at Gigafactory in Nevada. The larger cells enable 16% more range, 6 times more power, 5 times more energy than existing technology. And we got the news on a Panasonic earnings call today when their chief financial officer said they will be building a prototype production line at Gigafactory in Nevada. And it makes me wonder if this is the first announcement of perhaps others who Tesla are currently working with, the likes of CATL in China and LG Chem, and possibly more over the next decade. Imagine if Tesla said, well, we've got the IP and we've got the copyright, as it were, on how to make these tabless cells, and we'll make them available to you as the world's assemblers, the world's experts on assembling batteries. You know, Tesla can't do it all on their own. They can do a fair chunk on their own. So maybe they'll license that technology for others to make. Let me make a very clear distinction, though. There is a difference between making a cell, sourcing the raw materials and assembling those and producing them, and making cells into battery packs. Two separate jobs. And sometimes they get a little bit confused. Sometimes we call batteries when, you know, what we mean to say is the cells themselves. A battery is an assembled battery pack. That's when we say battery, what we mean. Two different jobs, right? And so even though Tesla are using cell-to-pack technology, making those cells directly into packs that are structural parts of the car, it's still a separate job. So what's not clear from this, which was a one-line sentence in an earnings call that was picked up on by the media, what's not clear is whether Panasonic will be building a cell production line, a pilot cell production line, or a pilot battery assembly line. It may seem like I'm talking about similar things, two very, very different things, actually. And so we'll see as in the fullness of time, we'll see what Panasonic are actually doing at Giga Nevada with these new 4680 cells. I think there's a world of possibility that we've barely scratched the surface on since Tesla's Battery Day. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that story and any others that we talk about on the podcast. If you leave a comment either on the YouTube show, it's just the audio. I know I should turn the camera on and do more visually, but, you know, podcast is so easy for me to make. I did this on radio for 22 plus years. Video, well, I'm like, you know, when you see old people using technology in front of their grandkids and they're like, oh, do it like this. Like, that's me making video. It's painful, but I know I should do more. For now, the YouTube show is audio only, and you can leave a comment there or email me your thoughts on any of the stories I talk about. Next, a milestone today. This should really be shouted from the rooftops because it's happened in various countries, but now it's happened across a wider area. EVs have overtaken diesel in Europe. Electric car sales have been steadily increasing until about 12 months ago, when they started to fly. And on the same hand, diesel sales have been steadily decreasing. Of course, Dieselgate gave it a little bit of a nudge as well, until about 12 months ago, when they fell off a cliff, and EV sales shot through the roof. The last year has been a real turning point. In fact, last month was a turning point because over the last trailing 12 months, EVs have overtaken diesel cars. Registrations we're talking about here. So these are registrations in Europe. EVs, and I mean cars with plugs, so I think plug-in hybrids are included in these figures. It's a significant milestone in the world of mobility and how we move around. Diesel has been so popular here in Europe, extremely popular for a number of factors. Price, the cars were at times cheaper. The fuel is certainly, if not cheaper to buy, you can go further on it. Legislators and various regulators around this area have, certainly here in the UK, they were very, very pro-diesel with massive discounts on tax for buying. I did, because it was 20 quid a year to tax the car. And so if you think about all of the advantages diesel had over the years, it's amazing to think that it's just had such an inglorious last 8 years, where it's just fallen from about 60% market share to now less than electric vehicles. And we've finally seen it falling off a cliff, and it's going to continue to do that even more so. I don't think it's going to flatline now. I think it's just going to disappear to zero, because as more people realise, hang on a minute, nobody I know's got a diesel, and actually, what's this about electric cars? I'm talking about the kind of, in the next adoption curve, not people like you and I, but when they realise that if they did buy a diesel, then they can't sell that in a few years' time. Nobody will want to buy one. And it's so cool that as the last few diesels will disappear from our roads, as diesel gets beaten by clean electric power, we can finally wave goodbye to disgusting, dirty diesel, which is particularly horrible when you get stuck behind kind of a commercial vehicle when you're, walking or riding your bike or something. And there's still a way to go with petrol, don't get me wrong, that still does very well, but the battle is ongoing, and we know where the battle ends. Like, this is not up in the air. You and I know how this plays out. It's just, we're enjoying the journey to get there. It's why I love making this podcast for you every day. Thank you for listening, if you do listen as a regular listener. Like, we know where this is going. We know the last page of the book is all electric transport. I'm just loving how we get, reading the book, I'm loving how we get there. So we know that combustion cars will peter out. It's just how quickly it happens, but it's fun to watch. Let's move on. And typically powered by diesel, but in the future, powered by electric. The all-electric Ford Transit is going to be revealed next month in a couple of weeks' time. We have a date for your diary, November the 12th. It's certainly something that if it's a live stream, I will be watching. Maybe it'll just be a YouTube ad they play. Maybe it'll be a live event. A couple of weeks' time, not next Thursday, but the week after. Ford will be unveiling the all-electric Ford Transit, and it's a van which is incredibly popular here. A bit of a legendary van, at least here anyway, in just van culture. Ford do make a plug-in hybrid version of the Transit. It does about 35 miles on batteries, not an exceptional vehicle, and it's good that maybe an all-electric version can gazump that. And there's so many great Fords coming, the Mustang Mach-E, the all-electric Ford F-150, and now an all-electric Transit. Could be a massive seller because of cheap running costs for those kind of companies that need a full-size van. And yes, I'm looking at you, delivery companies that have had a mega year thanks to the virus. All right, moving on. Just about the biggest name in wireless charging technology, or maybe the most well-known at least, is Witricity. Today they announced a $34 million investment, further strengthening their case that there is a future for wireless power transmission. I told you on the podcast recently that global standards for charging your car wirelessly have now been agreed, and that will allow companies to invest in wireless charging, knowing there's now a global standard. Wireless charging is, of course, extremely convenient, and indeed essential for those companies that want to run autonomous vehicles so they can recharge themselves when they're not being used. There's been various pilot programs over the years. One from BMW springs to mind. They were putting in wireless charging mats into people's homes and monitoring the data and doing a trial. Largely, wireless charging hasn't taken off yet. And don't get me wrong, it's not for the likes of home charging, where plugging in your cable isn't exactly the most onerous thing, and having a mat laid out on the floor isn't always the most convenient, because you've got to park your car reasonably accurate. In the old days, you go back a few years and you really had to park the car with pinpoint accuracy, but now Ballpark, get it right. There's often a sensor that beeps at you, or something on the screen that tells you, left a bit, right a bit, forward a bit, stop. And it's still less convenient than just leaving your car wherever you want in your driveway or garage and plugging the cable in, which is still more flexible than having to position it exactly over the mat/pad. However, there are so many use cases for wireless charging that I'm excited to see where this goes, and congratulations for more investment in that. All right, moving on. We all know that charging our cars has an impact on the electricity grid, and we know that overnight demand is very low, and that typically between 4 and 7 p.m. in the afternoon, evening, demand is very high. At least here. There are certain places, outliers, where I know air conditioning is running during the day when it's hot, and the peak is during the day. Looking at you, California. However, for most places, the grid is busiest when people get home from work. But, power grids need to be built to cope with the extremes. Power grids need to be built out to avoid brownouts and blackouts, that when we use maximum capacity, that the grid infrastructure is able to cope. But that does mean that there is always spare capacity on the grid, because you are never at capacity. It makes them inefficient, and it makes them expensive to build our infrastructure for power grids, because you got to build them for when we need them the most. But that's so rarely, and actually they operate most of their time in an inefficient state, because overnight we aren't using any power. However, there are ways to nudge people to move their behaviour, either with overnight electricity rates or incentives, and incentivizing people to charge when electricity is cheaper. And that is happening this weekend in California. How do you change people's behaviour? Well, you attract them with putting money in their pocket. Tesla owners in California are receiving messages today asking them if they want to be involved in a special trial, if they're supercharging this weekend. If you charge 9 till 9, so after 9 p.m. in the evening and before 9 o'clock in the morning. In other words, overnight, if you supercharge, you will pay a very small amount compared to normal. The trial starts tomorrow, goes on until the end of the 1st of November, and you'll pay a third of what you would normally pay supercharging in California. And I'm sure Tesla will use this weekend as a data gathering exercise to see if they can nudge people into charging when the grid is not being used. Therefore, it is cheaper, and often greener as well, by the way. So it's more cost effective for Tesla to purchase grid level that electricity. All right, let's talk Rivian. And the headline story today, the Rivian truck is getting its first big review. The truck, it won't be out for a while yet. It won't be on sale for 9 months or so. But there is a pre-production model that's been rallying and off-roading, and we've seen it in that Apple TV series and also in the hands of journalists. Now, Roadshow by CNET have written an extensive review after spending more than a week in the driver's seat of the Rivian R1T, the first ones to do this. The pre-production model they were driving had a 135 kilowatt-hour battery pack, and then when they make the production version, that should do you 300 miles of range. But when they were blatting up and down the sand dunes, they said they got more like 50 miles of range because they were just absolutely caning the battery. But plenty of power to unleash, 754 horsepower, 14.5 inches of ground clearance, and it'll be better off-road, more capable off-road in terms of ground clearance and all those things that you need for off-roading than a Ford F-150 Raptor or a Ram TRX. Well, CNET had good things to say about the Rivian's air suspension and how regen braking works really well when you're driving off-road, so much so that you barely need to use the brake pedal because the regen is so powerful when you're rolling down sand dunes. And because they were driving the Rivian off-road, it meant they weren't exactly near any charging infrastructure, so they were met en route by a portable semi-truck carrying a massive battery that charged 130 kilowatts of power. If only we all had our own personal charging station to follow us around. If you are travelling off-road in the future, though, you'll be able to use the Rivian Adventure Network. That's their off-road version of Tesla superchargers. CNET call it a game changer, unlike any other truck on the market, and you have to experience the sheer amount of torque for yourself to understand how powerful this truck is. They call it a total champ for when the going gets tough. Awesome news. Okay, let's move on and talk I was going to say replacement to the Nissan Leaf. I know it's a little bit naughty of me to say that because the Nissan Aria isn't a direct replacement to the Nissan Leaf. The Leaf isn't going anywhere yet. We may be a year away from the Aria arriving in Europe, but it doesn't mean that we haven't started to welcome some to the area. And they're entering Europe right now in perhaps the ultimate unboxing video, which is a popular genre of YouTube video. Nissan have shown the wooden crates being unboxed of the cars arriving over here. Made in Japan and arriving in Europe, they will be used and split between being show cars and test cars on Nissan's test grounds. Sales are scheduled for the second half sometime in 2021, so if it's a year away, it's a year away, but at least 8 months. And it's going to have plenty of competition, like the Volkswagen ID4 and, of course, the European-made Model Y will be on sale by then, but a little more expensive than the Nissan Aria, I must admit. Hey, let's talk about that. Reminds me of a story that I read. I really like this. If you're building a car factory, which, obviously Tesla are, if you're building a car factory from scratch and you're going to have thousands of employees, it's a fair guess many of them will be driving electric cars. Why not plan for an electric future when you're actually building the car parks and the factories? Well, that's what Tesla are doing at Gigafactory Berlin, as new filings have shown that the 12,000 workers at Giga Berlin will have access to 600 car chargers in the giant car park. There's a large area of car park dedicated to parking spaces with EV chargers and a large area devoted to parking with superchargers, which, you think about it, you can do the majority of the car park with level 2 slower charging. And that's great news, because if you go to work and you're there for 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 hours doing a shift, your car isn't moving. It doesn't need to supercharge. And I've been saying this for a long time. We talk about high-powered charging, we get excited, and, charging speed, bigger, better, all of that. There's a lot to be said for a 3 or a 6 or a 7 kilowatt post. There's a huge amount to be said for not trickle charging, not a 3-pin plug, not a domestic plug, but if you can install a decent number, if you can install hundreds of level 2 chargers at a time, if it is cost efficient to do that, and ultimately you could just put plug sockets in and people could trickle charge it, on the granny cable, but if you can put level 2 chargers in, then a cost effective level for workplaces, it is absolutely a no-brainer. Obviously, somebody has to pay for it in the first place, and Tesla seem to be thinking along the same lines as myself. All right, final story. The Model Y is now being used for a Tesla service vehicle. Great to see Tesla using more electric cars for their own service vehicles and their service fleets. Something that I spotted on Reddit today. A Tesla employee was seen patching up a charging station, a destination charger by the look of it from the picture, and all their tools were stored in the back of a Model Y. Now, in the past, I've seen Tesla using Model S's, like converted Model S's with all their tools in the back, or Mercedes vans, ultimately, which, are combustion vans. And I've not seen too many I've seen no Model X's used as service vehicles. Maybe you have. Well, it makes sense to use the Model Y because they make a lot more of them than the Model X, and also they're cheaper to make. And I wonder how many of the Cybertruck will be used for the purpose of being part of Tesla's fleet. Time will tell. And that is your show, my friends, for today, and the end of the week. Well, there are 919 previous shows online, which you can listen to right now. The blog is evnewsdaily.com if you would like to have a look, and I would invite you to check out the website anytime you want to leave a little review on Apple iTunes. If you do exist in the Apple universe, then you can leave a review on your iOS device or your Mac, however you listen to this podcast that way. And if you wouldn't mind doing that, it'd be awesome, because it really helps other people see your review, and a bit of social proof, because then they'll think, oh, I might have a listen to that podcast. You never know. You might know what he's talking about. Maybe, you never know. So yeah, any reviews, always very useful, and of course your support on Patreon is always appreciated and never taken for granted. Our premier partners are Phil Roberts of Electric Future, Brad Crosby, Avid Technology, Porsche of The Village, they're in Cincinnati, Audi of Cincinnati East, Volvo Cars of Cincinnati East, NationalCarCharging.com and AlohaCharge.com, Derek Riley and the EV Review Ireland YouTube channel, and Richard at rsimons.co.uk. They are the electric vehicle specialists. Hello to our partners of the show, and I could not do it without you. David listens in the car with his partner Lisa. David and Lisa Alan. Hello to OEM Audio of New Zealand and evpower.co.nz for your accessories. Gareth Hamer. Thank you very much, Gareth. E-Mobility Norway, recent guests on the podcast. Bob Boothby, getting back up and running with Millbrook Cottages, an elopement wedding venue. Hello to Darren McCleskey from Denovo Real Estate. Jukka Kukkonen, nice to get your email this week. Thank you, sir. From shift2electric.com. And Rajiv Narayan, someone I love chatting to over email. Hello to all of our executive producers, Alan Robson, Alan Shed, Alex Banahini, Alexander Frank, Anders Hove, Andrea Jefferson, Asir Khalid, Ashley Hill, Bjard Fuchstack, Brian Thompson, Bruce Bohannon, Charles Hall, and Chris Hopkins. Christopher Barth, our latest addition. Colin Hennessy and Cam EV, Craig Coles, Craig Rogers, Damian Davis, Darren Fetch, Dave Jewson, David Finch, David Moore, David Partington, and David Prescott. Don McAllister, who runs screencastsonline.com and enjoying his Model 3. Eruk Yuni Nyombi, Frederick Rovick, Gene Rubin, Gilberto Rosado, Jeff Lowe, Headley Wright, Ian Griffiths, Ian Sear, Ian Waddy Watkins, Jack Oakley, James Storr, Jim Morris, John, who is bearding with Beardface, and Kent EVs, John Manchak, Juan Gonzalez, Ken Morris, Kevin Merson, Carl Mall, and Lars Dallager. Lawrence D. Allen, Lee Brown, Luke Cully, Marcel Ward, Mark Bossett, Marty Young, Matt Piccioni, Mia Oppelstrup, Michael Pastroni, Mike Winter, and Nathan Gore Brown. Neely Roberts from Sussex EVs, Nicholas Miller, Nigel Miles, Ohad Aston, Paul Ridings, Paul Stevenson, Pete Glass, Pete Gordon, Peter and D. Roberts at Oxon EVs, Phil Mouchet, Philip Troutman, Raj Badwell, Renee Kumick, Renee Schneider, Richard Lipinski, Rob Hermans, Rob from the RS Thinks EV channel on YouTube, Rupert Mitchell, Soki Payne, Stephen Penn, Steve John, Thomas J. Tias, Todd Oakes, The Plug Seeker, and his YouTube channel. Tim Gutteridge and William Langhorne. Have a wonderful weekend. Happy Halloween. Have a good one. I will see you for a new edition of the show on Monday. Oh, and do remember, there is no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.